You're tuned in to Ask the Master Auto Technician. Car questions? Get answers right now. Call 850-763-0555.
James Auto Center, we fix it right, guaranteed. Beep, 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 yeah.
Hey, this is James Morris. You got a car question, give us a call at 850-763-0555. There's no dumb questions out there. Just the only dumb question is one you didn't ask when we're off the air and we can't help you out. We were talking about the 2013s are coming out right now. Hard to believe it's 2013. I mean, I just hard, you know, here it is, June, almost August, and they're starting to come out, 2013. And some of the cars that are coming out have already had some recalls on it. What was it? Sherry was telling us about one of the Ford cars had a problem with the fuel line, and they had to recall those, take care of them, and they extended the warranties on it. But that's the thing people are doing also. You're getting cars now that have extended warranties. I mean, 3-year 36,000 used to be the norm for years, and now with the 2012s and 13s coming out, they've gone the way of Kia and Hyundai. They had the 5-year 60,000 mile or 5-year 100,000 mile warranty or 7-year 100,000 mile warranty. I can't keep up with them, but that's the same thing where General Motors is going, Ford's going. They're all going to powertrain warranties of 100,000 miles on average. What was I hearing someone the other day? They're doing a 200,000 mile warranty on a car. I'm going, wow, can't find that hard to believe. But there's always a catch to it. Now the catch is if you change the fluids like they prescribe, it will work like you're supposed to. Now, I'll give you a perfect example. My wife, we have a Kia Sorento 2008, and it has a 5-year, 100,000 mile powertrain warranty. Powertrain is engine, transmission, differential. That's the powertrain. And in order for them to give you that 5-year warranty, they want timing belts changed at certain intervals. They want oil changed at certain intervals. They want filters changed at certain intervals. They want certain kind of oils put in it. They want certain kind of fluids in the rear end stuff. And I started looking at the differential service back there. Now, most differentials on most cars go 50 to 100,000 miles before anyone even thinks about changing the fluid on them. Well, in this vehicle, you have to change it according to the manual every 9,000 miles. We got 25,000 miles on the vehicle, and I think we've changed it right at 3 times now. The point being, you do that, we won't have any trouble with this differential. When we pull it out, the fluid looks perfectly clean. It's got a little magnet on the plug. One thing I've noticed about it, when I pull it out, there's no metal shavings on it. It's pretty impressive. Now, if I pull another car out that's got 30, 40,000 miles on it, when I pull out that plug, if it's got a drain plug on it, I always find metal shavings. I always do. I always find little pieces of metal. But if I pull a car out, like my wife's Kia, the Sorento, and I pull the differential plug out to drain it out after 9,000 miles, there's never any metal on it. So maybe there is a good reasoning to change your fluids a little more often. I have people all the time that tow. They have big trucks and they tow with them, and they always change the oil in the engine. Always change the oil in the engine, and they're pretty good about changing the fluid in the transmission, you know, in the filter. But they seem to neglect the differentials or the transfer cases if they're four-wheel drive. They do. For some strange reason, they never think about the transfer case. That the transfer case is what supplies power to the front axles. That's what it does. But it's all the time spinning and turning. No matter if the drive shaft is turning on the rear, going to the rear differential, and your 2-wheel drive is still making the transfer case move. Things are still moving inside it. So fluid still gets hot, fluid still gets aerated, fluid can still break down. So it's very, very important that all your fluids get changed on regular intervals. And I have people sometimes say, well, James, what would you consider a regular interval? And Mark Sarlo, who comes on the show he'll be on in about 30 minutes. He is an automotive engineer, and he says, man, if you really want to have an interval other than oil, the best interval for antifreeze, the best interval for transmissions, the best interval for differentials, the best interval time for transfer cases is 2 years or 30,000 miles. That's a pretty safe interval. That's not being too overly cautious and not being too underly, what I'm trying to say, not trying to take advantage of any situation. But 30,000 miles or 2 years. Now, I've got some people that don't put 30,000 miles on in 3 years or 4 years. And I say, you know, believe it or not, it's still open. The transfer case, the rear ends are still open to the atmosphere. They're still breathing in high humidity or dirt and things. So every 2 years, regardless of the mileage, or 30,000 miles, whichever comes first, change your transmission fluid, change your differential fluid, change your brake fluid. You'll be surprised how many times we'll change brake fluid on a car, And we'll see, and every time it comes in, we check it, and twice a year we change oil on people's cars, so about every 5 to 6,000 miles, and we start watching the boiling point of brake fluid drop. After about a year and a half, it's gone from 500 degrees Fahrenheit to where after about a year it's down to 400 degrees, and after 2 years it's down to about 350. Now you say, well, big deal, boiling point, what difference does that make? Well, believe it or not, it makes a difference in how a car stops. What happens is when you're going stop and go driving, which we have a lot of stop and go driving, if you have to go over the bridge, go to the beach or come back over or whatever, you get caught in traffic, you're hitting your brakes, and your brakes get as hot as 1,000 degrees Fahrenheit. I've actually seen them turn cherry red going down the highway, and they're working normal, but 1,000 degrees is where they can get up that hot, maybe a little hotter, and the fluid will start to boil inside the calipers. Well, because the boiling point of the brake fluids dropped from 500, 400, 300 to 250 degrees to 300 degrees, and now any moisture is inside there. That's what drops the boiling point, is moisture gets inside the system. It's starting to boil. Now we got these bubbles inside there, so when you hit your brake pedal feels a little spongy. The car stops, but you have to put a little bit more effort into it. I noticed yesterday, don't drive my wife's Kia very often, and I got in yesterday and the brakes when I first got in, felt spongy compared to my Prius. And that might be because it's regenerative braking in the Prius, and every time you just even think about touching that brake pedal, it starts to slow down, is how it works in regenerative braking. But I told myself I need to check the brake fluid, make sure her car, it's a 2008, I know we've changed the brake fluid at least once, and here it is 2012, it's probably due to be changed again. Probably the boiling point's dropped on it as well. And by changing the brake fluid, I know that I can get more life out of my brakes. I know that my brakes will last longer. I know they won't drag. I know they're not going to get rust built up in it. And then when at 50, 60,000 miles, when my brakes are wore out on this vehicle, I won't have to change the calipers. I won't have to change the hydraulics. I may have to change the mounting brackets or the insulators or the screamers, or the mounting hardware, but I may not have to change the calipers so long as I keep the brake fluid clean and that keeps everything soft and supple inside the caliper. That means the square cut O-rings aren't hard. They're not covered with rust and corrosion from moisture. That's what makes calipers stick. We had a car that had 60,000 miles in it, came in, and it was a 2001, and and the pads were wore out, and I said, you got a lot of moisture in the system. We've changed the brake fluid on it. We need to change your pads, and I'm going to recommend calipers, but I can't really tell you there's anything wrong with them. I'm going to recommend it, but it's your call. What do you want to do? And they said, well, just go ahead and put pads on. Let's see what's going on. Well, we put pads and cut the rotors or replaced the rotors, whatever it was. Everything was fine around here driving. Well, they decided to go on a trip, and about halfway to Colorado, their front brakes locked up. They pulled into an Napa Auto Care facility, looked at it, and said, well, your calipers are bad. They've locked up. Not just one, but both of them. It wasn't the brake lines, it wasn't anything, but it was the calipers. The phenolic pistons inside there just couldn't take the heat, and all the rust had been in there because the first 60,000 miles they never changed their brake fluid. And so the rust was still there. So they ended up, having to have new calipers put in. They had to pay for the caliper because they never paid for them, but the pads were under warranty. So it helped them out by having that peace of mind warranty that's provided by Napa. But the point being is, that's why I recommend changing calipers, especially if people don't change their brake fluid every 30,000 miles or every 2 years. Remember, this was a 2001, 60,000 miles on it, almost a 10-year-old car. At that time, it was a 10-year-old car. So the rusting and the phenolic pistons, which are plastic, they had swelled up, pushed them back in, trying to do the best job we could, trying to make sure we don't take advantage of the customer, giving them the best possible job for the money. Everything seemed fine around here in town. But once they got on the highway and started doing those 60, 70, 80 mile an hour stops and high speeds, got those calipers really toasty, things started to happen. Ended up having to get the brake calipers changed. So just because you think you don't have low mileage on a car, you shouldn't have to do these things. Changing fluids are very, very important. Whether it's brake fluid, whether it's engine oil, whether it's transfer cases, whatever it is, you really need to make sure you keep your fluids changed. That's the livelihood of keeping something alive, is keeping those fluids changed. Because Transmission fluid. I see it all the time. Transmission fluid breaks down after about 30,000 miles. That's when we start seeing problems develop. Power steering fluid. No one ever bothers to change their power steering fluid till they have a leak or till the rack and pinion starts to leak. And the reason it starts to leak is the seals have hardened up because the fluid has gotten old. The fluid is not doing its ability to keep them soft and supple. Same thing with brake fluid. If the fluid gets old, it can't do its job. Fluid does more than lubricate. Fluid does more than transfer heat. Fluid actually does a great job of keeping seals intact. And by changing the fluid, changing all the fluid, you actually get rid of the nasties that are in there because, like, remember, transfer cases don't have filters in them. Differentials don't have filters in them. All they have is magnets, if that. The same thing with power steering pumps. There's no filters in them. So you're getting this fluid turning around, recirculating, constantly being put under high stress conditions, gets dirty, and it loses its ability to not foam. It loses its ability to get rid of heat. It loses its ability to shearing, where it keeps an actual thin film amount between metal to metal parts. And so that's why power steering pumps whine and make noise. Hey, if you got a car question, got a comment, want to sound off, give us a call, 850-763-0555 with your automotive question.
James Auto Center, we fix it right, guaranteed.